This is Sky News at 9. You're watching the press preview. It's a first look at the papers as they reach us here at Sky Centre. So in the next half hour, we'll see what's in tomorrow's headlines with the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, and the journalist and blogger, Sunny Handal. Good to see you both, gents. But before we have a chat through the papers, just going to run through the main stories tonight. West Midlands Police have released CCTV footage of rioters shooting at officers in Birmingham. They show a man firing a gun at a line of police officers in the Aston area of the city last Tuesday. Aerial footage taken by the force's helicopter also shows the aircraft being targeted. 11 shots were fired in total. No officers were injured.
Certainly evidence of several gunmen, evidence of a level of planning and organisation, and clearly this is a huge threat to my officers. But the presence of these gunmen on the streets of Birmingham is also a threat to the wider community.
The 14-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of Leroy James in North London. Leroy, who was also 14, died after being stabbed in a playground in Enfield on Wednesday afternoon. The boy, who's also been charged with possession of an offensive weapon, will appear in court on Monday. Human rights in my sights, says the Prime Minister. Now, Nigel, I guess you may have one or two things to say about this.
Interesting comment in this week's Spectator by James Forsyth, one of your regular newspaper reviewers. And Forsyth makes the point this week that Cameron is very good in the wake of a crisis at making a statement, catching the public mood, sounding tough, and then not delivering. And this story is classic of that. Look, to be a member of the European Union, you have to be a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. It's as simple as that. It's a treaty obligation. Now, if David Cameron is saying that he's prepared to change the European treaties, or even better, to keep his cast iron guarantee and give us a referendum on this issue, then I'd be absolutely over the moon. Sadly, I just don't believe it.
It is pure posturing, and I completely agree with that point. Yeah, it is pure spin. However, it's also blaming the wrong thing. I mean, how can anyone say that human rights legislation was to blame for the riots? It doesn't make sense. I mean, he's basically saying that the human rights culture has created a sense of moral decline, which actually doesn't make sense. You've got a bunch of kids who went out looting, who are not really into human rights. You know, we've actually thrown away a lot of the human rights in the wake of the riots. You know, the sentencing has been really harsh. They've deliberately been said, you know, you can go and, you know, sentence them strongly if you want to. So you know, this idea that you can just blame human rights, it's just kind of saying...
There is a culture developing, isn't there? I mean, you do hear it from teachers that you talk to from time to time who say, look, if you got an awkward child in a classroom and you try to discipline them, and they start throwing human rights quotes.
The trouble with the Human Rights Act and the incorporation of the ECHR into British law is that no one quite knows anymore what's right and what's wrong. And there is this general perception
that's a separate issue.
That the certainties of law are not what they were. There is also a huge perception with some justification that it's actually become a criminal's charter and that people are able to abuse the Human Rights Act. I mean, come on, we have people here, illegal immigrants here, who claim they must stay because they have a right to a family life because they have a pet cat, and that's uphill.
No,
so there is some real anger over this.
There is some tabloid stuff which is sometimes made up about how people are not allowed to be deported because of their cat or whatever.
This is made up, this is fact.
Okay,
it comes from our court system.
Let's stick to the issue here, which is about the riots. And the point there is, you can say, okay, well, you know, a teacher can't beat the child or discipline the child because they know about human rights. But what do we want to do? Do we want to go back to
it's not about beating children. Let's keep it in context.
So the question is a broader issue about the fact that people don't respect authority, right? You can say that we have a culture where people don't respect authority. That has got nothing to do with the Human Rights Act. This country has been at the forefront of developing human rights, individual liberties, you know, and that is what has created our democracy. This idea that somehow that is undermining our moral fabric it's ludicrous.
I think the system of liberty that we've always known and understood, people clearly knew the difference between right and wrong. The difficulty with human rights is that everything's been thrown up into the air, and there is huge uncertainty.
You're conflating two different things. Human rights are about legally enshrined rights about what you're, you know, what you are allowed to do under the law or not. an idea of what is right or wrong is a moral issue, and that is something that gets taught by your parent, gets taught by your teachers, gets taught by the society that you live in. We're living in a society which says greed is good. We're living in a society which says go out and do things and break the law necessarily if you feel that you have to. And this is not just at the bottom, but at the top. You know, with MPs' expenses, with bankers, with people at tabloid newspapers. So the idea that you can just blame sort of a youth, I think you're not looking at the problem.
No one's saying that the Human Rights Act is the absolute sole cause of the riots.
That's what he's focusing on. I mean,
no one's
human
arguing
rights,
that.
This is what the problem is.
But what is for certain is that Cameron will do absolutely nothing about it.
And it's back to the moral decline that we were talking about earlier on. And he's saying it's nothing to do with the riots. And he's actually citing some interesting points, isn't he, Nigel?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the whole piece, it seems to me, is Blair self-justification, saying that everything that happened was nothing to do with his time as Prime Minister. That's my take on this story. He says it's not moral decline, but he does say that it's the breakdown of the family. He does say that it's feral youth. I'd have thought, as a devout Christian, he would have thought the breakdown of the family was, in fact, part of that moral decline. And he seems to be saying that had he stayed on as Prime Minister, he would really have got tough with these people. So I must say, I don't find the argument he makes here very credible at all.
Well, he does admit some wrong, and he says that, you know, when he intervened after the Jamie Bulger case, you know, he did something similar, and he said at that time it was good politics but bad policy. So his point is that, you know, Cameron's doing the same thing, which is to say, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to sound tough, you know, and then end up actually not putting anything in place that makes sense or does deal with the problem. I will disagree on one point, though. I mean, you said that, you know, the breakdown of the family is moral decline. I mean, it's not necessarily. What we're talking about is people cohabiting more. We're talking about more single parents. Now, single parents doesn't necessarily mean moral decline. I mean, my mother is, you know, has brought me up as a single parent. They can raise you up fine. You know, they can raise you with good moral values.
But something is going wrong in some of the communities across the UK, and there has been a focus on black communities in this.
There's always something been wrong in certain parts of this country. I mean, you know, this is not the first time which we've had riots. This is not the first time that you've had criminal use.
No, it's not. But isn't the difference with this? It's the first time that riots have kicked off in one area, and then anyone with half a chance has just joined in all across the country. That's what it seems to
true.
do.
And part of that is to do with the fact that social media allows people to coordinate better, you know, and it allows people to see what's happening on screen and say, wow, the police have not been able to keep control of this.
But there was a message there, wasn't there? I mean, you know, 2 weeks ago in Tottenham, what people saw was looting going on and the police having been given orders not to intervene. So that message...
That was a mistake. That was definitely a mistake.
That message went out. But I mean, the point about the family, I mean, look, you know, whether it's moral decline or whether the breakdown of the family is moral decline or not, I think there is some justification in saying that there is an absence of father figures in some communities, and the argument that the gang then becomes the substitute for the family, I think is quite a powerful argument.
No, it's an easy argument to make. Let me just answer that point.
But the gangs are powerful.
Okay, briefly.
Gangs are easy, but you know, you had lots of middle-class families, kids from middle-class families, from perfectly normal families also taking part. So it's easy to say it's certain communities.
But the gang culture was behind the beginning of all
the gang culture has been around for a while, but it goes across the board in Eastern Europe, it goes across the board
in
all
of this, the Sunday Times saying police are searching for 30,000 rioters, which is one heck
Where are they going to put them all?
of a figure.
Yeah,
well,
the prisons are full already.
This is the problem, is it? They've also looking at, and we haven't really got time to discuss it in this section a great deal, home bin collections are axed, which is, it's one of those issues which, you know, in the great scheme of things doesn't seem very important, but actually does have big implications.
It impacts on people's lives, and of course it all started because of a whole rash of European laws on landfill, but we probably haven't got time to go through it.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Nigel, Sonny, thank you both very much indeed.